Hi, everyone. Today I'm excited to talk to Zoe Barnett, a professional copywriter that I recently started working with on a new photography website. Zoe, nice to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you, Alex. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries, my pleasure. So, we've had the opportunity to work together on this new website recently. I was impressed by your work, so I wanted to connect and maybe have this conversation about copywriting in general. Maybe other photographers that I work with can learn from.
Yeah,
I,
sounds
s-
great.
I, I say that because in my mind I can kind of compare your work with what I've seen in the past, both from photographers who did hire other copywriters, and the final result, the output wasn't that convincing. It was, I don't know, mediocre sometimes, or with cases where the photographer just writes the copy themselves. They come to me with the website. Exactly. This time I feel you really got the fun nature of the website, the personality of the photographer, what he was going for. And for anyone watching this, right now I'll try to overlay some screenshots from that website. I think it has a ton of humor in line with that photographer, basically, with their brand. I think the copy is clear, it's not too verbose. I also appreciated all the micro copy as well, all the small bits of text, call to action buttons, for example, all of that. And before we dive in, Zoe, I just had one final thing. I wanted to make it really clear who this is for, because in my mind, this interview is for photographers who are somewhat established and they want a bespoke website. They want something to stand out from, the amateurish thousands of other photographers using simple templates. They want to get results from the website, and I think through proper copywriting, they can get that done. This is probably not for do it yourself beginner photographers, but maybe they should stick around. They'll learn some things from this. Okay, enough intro. Let's get to know you a bit more. How did you start as a copywriter? What's your experience?
Okay, so I actually started off in a general marketing role. I came out of university. I was a fresh-faced 21-year-old, eager to get into, a good corporate career, and I did. And I stepped into a marketing role in an industrial engineering company. It was international. It's very exciting. Got to go to Dubai and Germany and Italy and had a great time. Then I started another role within a tech company, an American owned tech company based here in the UK. And again, really good marketing role, got loads of experience. But as it was a generalist marketing role, I learnt loads. I got to go down to Google in London and, learn a lot about SEO. SEO was always very important, talking back 2014, 2015, 2016, where people were really starting to get into digital marketing. Um, and I used to liaise a lot with copywriters. So we used to use copywriting agencies, content marketing agencies. Talking in a tech company in an international scale company, big budgets, lovely big marketing budgets. So we got to outsource a lot. And I liaised a lot with copywriters. At one point in my career, over about 7 years, I was quite senior. Um, and I used to think to myself, I love what they do. I wish I could write all day long. So in 2018, I something happened in my life, as these things do, big life event, and I decided actually I'm going to go off and quit my job. I was 27 at the time. I was like, I'm only 27. I'm just going to leave and freelance and just see where it goes. And I think, as probably a lot of photographers can relate to, is if you have a passion for something, you kind of keep coming back to it. And that's what happened with copywriting. So I started off doing these general marketing freelance jobs. I'd make social media posts and build out campaigns for people. But actually, what it kept coming back to is the words element and the strategic words. And over the course of that was 2018, we're now in 2024. Can't quite believe it. It's just become more and more specialized because I found that my, I suppose, zone of genius is actually creating strategic website copy that really aligns with creative and small businesses, what they need to say when they're at that point where they're at like a tipping point when they need to up level. And that's really it. That's where I am at the moment, is specializing in website copy and SEO copy.
Great journey. I think, like you said, many photographers can relate to the leap they have to take sometimes to do this creatively instead of a regular comfy office job sometimes.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
and I think you told me you also have experience working with photographers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a copywriter, when I first started out, I think, and again, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is that you start off kind of taking anything. You might photograph anything at the start, just to kind of get things going as a freelancer. And that's very much where I was. I wrote for all different industries, and I have written for all different industries. But as I've become more specialized, I tend to work with more creative industries. So I've written for a handful of photographers now. I've written for wedding photographers, newborn photographers, motherhood photographers, and then recently, headshot photographer, birth photography. So I have, whilst it's not my only area that I cover, like I said, I tend to work with creative businesses, online service providers. It does seem to be a growing area for me.
Perfect. Well, maybe I can help create that connection a bit more.
I would love that.
Um, so let's dive straight into the main question. Why should anyone hire a copywriter? How does that help photographers, which is my audience? How does that help them stand out or improve their website?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I've mulled over many years now. Is when you're promoting your own services, why would somebody need a copywriter? And for ages, I was thinking, well, everybody needs a copywriter. Like, of course, you need a copywriter. But what I think is the real answer is when you start off in a business and you're doing well and you're gaining traction, and you probably stick a website up there and stick some words on a website and say what you need to say. You get to a point where you're doing well, but you want to do better. You're at this tipping point, and when you're at that tipping point in your business, you need to really stand out to the right people, okay? Because you might have a lot of the wrong people, people that, I always use the example of, get an inquiry and you do the work, and then they say, I can't afford you actually, or you're too much, you're out of my budget. What copywriting does for photographers is it will position them at a certain level. It will make them stand out as a professional, more so as a professional at that higher level. It will elevate them, and it will give them really cohesive messaging that they feel really confident in, and also refine and hone that brand voice. And these are all the things that kind of come together to give a really good client experience before they even become your client. So, like I said, and you said previously, if you are just starting out and you're just getting a website out there, fair enough. Copywriting is probably not something that you want to invest in. But if you're at that tipping point and you're thinking of pushing and elevating your business, I think that is the time where you're going to want to really invest in tightening everything up and getting those higher caliber clients.
Okay, sounds perfect. You said you spoke about um, a photographer who needs to refine the content, and I do see that in clients I work with. Like they do have an older website, but the copy is just not polished enough, or it's too vague without a clear audience in mind. I've also seen cases, and maybe I'll add a bit to what you were saying. Cases where photographers they want to start fresh, a whole new website. They don't know how to write that first draft. They're having, the analysis paralysis, staring at a blank document. That's kind of a different struggle sometimes, where again they should hire a copywriter which can help them write that first version, basically. I would imagine.
Yeah, so analysis paralysis when you're starting your copy is so, so common. And I think in terms of where to start and how to start, it's really thinking, what is your overall message? What is the one thing that you want to get across? Now, that might sound like a simple question, but there's lots of questions that feed into that. So, why do you want to say that to somebody? What is that message going to say in order for them to actually connect with you as a brand, as a business? And why is it that they want to hire you off the back of that message? So, I guess my advice would be is to really put in the time to work into what that message is. I think there's a kind of a feeling sometimes that website copy, it's not long, it's not passage, it shouldn't be long, it shouldn't be, like you said at the start, it shouldn't be overly verbose, it shouldn't be a long paragraph of text. It's actually, best practice is usually between 350 and 500 words for a page of copy. Homepage could be only 350 words. And actually, the reality is the shorter the copy, the more you have to work into it to get it right. So my advice is to really carve out that time and put that energy into getting that right first. So what is your message? What is that first thing that you want to say? And then the rest should flow more naturally. But a common mistake is to think, well, it's only 350 words, right? I'll put a couple of hours in my diary and I'll get it sorted. But that's not enough time. Or, you hire somebody, you work with somebody who's going to do that for you, because that's what their expertise lies in.
Okay, perfect. Makes complete sense. Let's say someone is convinced that they do need to hire a copywriter. Either, like you said, they're struggling with that first draft, or their own output is mediocre. They want to make it polished. How do they go about choosing a copywriter? What should they look out for? You probably know how people reach out to you looking for a copywriter.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I will say is there are lots and lots of copywriters out there. There are lots of people that write copy as well as part of their offering. So the first thing I would say is just be really clear in terms of what you need. My recommendation would be to go for a specialist copywriter, someone who is very au fait with how websites and SEO work. There are lots of copywriters and people that write copy that are not specialized in websites and SEO. And I think this is where a lot of websites not fall down, but maybe don't have the impact that people want. They invest in a website designer because that's a bit of a no-brainer that they're going to go to a website designer. They're not just going to go to a designer, are they? They're going to go with a website designer. And even more so, it's a bit more of a no-brainer to go with a website designer that's specialized in that industry. And then they get told, or they realize that they need a copywriter. So they go out there and they look for a copywriter, and there's tons of copywriters. What you want to be looking for is a copywriter who is a specialist in websites and SEO, because what happens then is we know how to write the copy to work with the design, to be cohesive with the design. And like you mentioned at the start, Alex, about things like microcopy, I admit, when I started writing copy, being a copywriter 5-6 years ago, I didn't think about things like that. But what you do is, the more websites you work on, I solely work on website copywriting projects. I know all the tiny elements that are needed to make your brand really cohesive across the board, and everything that your website designer is going to need. So that's the SEO elements as well. So yeah, it's specialists in website design, SEO expertise. There's a lot of copy that, I mean, I can't imagine many photographers watching this would be saying, oh, I don't need to rank on Google. I don't bothered about Google. That's not the case. Most people want to show up on Google. I say 99% of people want to show up on Google. So writing copy for Google is also, an area of expertise that you need to make sure that you're investing in. there are, again, there's a difference between someone that can write for Google and someone that's really specialized in writing copy for websites and Google. Okay. Because there's a bit of an art to it. You've got to balance the best practices of what Google's telling you to do. So, and what Google's advising. And then there's also the balancing it with the creative side. So making sure that it's still really, really good for your ideal client. Because if you know, put a load of keywords in there and go, yeah, this will do great, chances are you'll get people on there and they'll not enjoy the experience of the website where the copy plugs into.
Okay.
So
Uh,
SEO expertise is a big part.
yeah, I can vouch for what you said. When we worked on this recent project together, the document I got from you, basically from the photographer, with your copy, was so much more complete that I've been used to seeing in the past from copywriters. Whereas it used to be just a, I don't know, a Google Doc with blocks of text. And I had the job then as the web designer to try and use that and sprinkle that throughout the website the way I see fit. And obviously, some of that copy meaning would then be lost. But from you, the document, which was kind of almost a complete content wireframe, let's call it, I just had very specific details, all the headings, all the image captions. There was a graphic which had kind of a shout out of, hey, this is my name. And call buttons were all spelled out, SEO tags. So it was much more complete. And it kind of showed the experience of writing for a website, not copy in general. So just to confirm what you said.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah. And that is one of the biggest things. I actually had a brainwave about, gosh, it must have been about 2.5 years ago. I actually came back off maternity leave after having my son. And I just I didn't rip up what I'd done in the business, but I kind of just reassessed everything that I was doing for clients. And I tendered for quite a big project here in the UK and I won it. So I was ecstatic. And I remember I was really ill. I actually had COVID. And I was sat there and I was thinking, I feel really stuck with this web copy and I've won this amazing project. And then it just kind of hit me that I don't need to open up a Google document. I can almost design how the copy should flow, how it should feel. I always say I have no influence on design, like I totally leave that to the designers. But what it does show is how the copy works. And as a living, breathing thing, because website copy isn't a static document. It is, it's a living, breathing thing that's meant to be an experience. It's meant to be experienced on the design of a website. So that became really important to me. Rolled it out, and it's been a huge success. Clients love it, and the website designers love it, which makes the project really easy for the client as well, I find.
Yeah, it all goes much more smoothly, let's say, because there's intention behind how the copy is structured, and then the design follows that as well, and it's a good fit there, and the end result is better. Whereas in other projects, I had to kind of get all the copy that was provided to me and try to think myself how to all structure it, and so it makes sense both visually and in terms of content and message and structure. So yeah, it's a good way to work. So I enjoy that. Let's move on to let's say that some photographers either don't have the budget to work with a copywriter or they're still keen on writing the copy themselves. What are some mistakes you've seen when people do that on their websites? I can tell you, just to lead you off a bit, I can tell you mistakes I've seen from photographers when they provide the copy to me. Usually it's some form of either too much content, it's too much, and editing it down is obviously very difficult, or too little, it's completely lacking any sort of gallery descriptions, SEO tags, no tag. The homepage is just images and no text, and lack of content in general. Or the copy that they do provide has mistakes, from the obvious grammar and spelling mistakes to inconsistencies. They use plural. They call themselves we when it's clearly a solo photographer. They're using passive voice all the time. Mistakes like that. What, I'm sure you have a vast experience. What mistakes have you seen?
One of the biggest issues that I see when people DIY their copy is it almost has like a wishy-washy mishmash vibe. And what I mean by that is they kind of write every single page as if it's almost like a singular task. But web copy, again, you've got to remember your website's an experience, it's experience as a whole. And I think there's like, forgetting that people are going across your website. They're not reading it page by page like it's a book. So people will approach, DIY copy. They'll literally go, right, I'm going to write my homepage. Right, I'm going to write my about page. Right, I'm going to write my services page. And there's no cohesive elements that bring it and wrap it all together. And this is, I keep saying about messaging, but that is why it's so important to get your messaging right. Something that John, our client John, and I spoke about is, the fact that he felt when he had this copy done with me that everything was cohesive, whereas before that he had like a page here and a page there, and his services were written in one style in one way, and then he had things like more SEO but more robotic copy. So we get quite a lot of a wishy-washy vibe, and that is natural because people don't always approach it as one whole project. But being more granular in terms of what tends to be the issue is just really, I say it's basic. It's basic because I do it as a job. It's my career, so it's not basic to everyone. Much as I couldn't pick up a camera and know how to take an awesome photo,
Mhm.
but it's like you've got. I see it all the time. You go on the homepage and you get the hero section, and you just get something like welcome or
Mhm.
hello or just something really generic. Whereas this is your opportunity to say your message to someone, to say the right thing to the right people. So that is an opportunity completely missed. And then just other real simple SEO basics. So not even including exactly what kind of photographer you are, your location in the H1, the heading 1 tag, which I don't want to get overly technical because that's not what we're here for today. But if you are DIYing your copy, you're not going to know to do those simple things that help Google crawl your website and also just offer a better client experience. Because the reality is if a client's coming on your website and they can see very clearly that your H1 tag in SEO terms says that you are a brand photographer in Chicago, then that's a no-brainer that people instantly feel like, oh, I'm in the right place, rather than just seeing welcome.
Yeah.
So that is, as you can probably tell, that is something that's a big gripe of mine. I think in terms of spelling and grammar and passive voice and things that are like more about the writing, and I'm sure we'll touch on this in a bit, but fortunately we do have fantastic AI tools now that can tighten things up for people. So that is becoming less of a problem. But I think the biggest problem is not treating things as a cohesive experience. So not doing your web copy as a whole and pulling that through. And yeah, just those quick wins, those things that really make a difference, just being completely overlooked.
And in that website we worked together on, do you remember all the dentist jokes that you sprinkled throughout the website on multiple pages, kind of like a cohesive master joke throughout the website? It was so cool. Stuff like that, basically.
Yeah, and it's so funny because John and I talked about this at the time, and I think we even had a joke in the footer about, no offense to dentists, we love you guys, and it was really like it felt like it was John throughout. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. If you're investing in a photographer, you want to really feel like you know them and you feel comfortable with them before they actually come and do something that's it's pretty personal, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And with that website example in mind, microcopy, let's talk about that a bit. Why do you spend so much attention to it when you're working with a photographer? Why do you feel it's important?
So I really think it comes down to, again, this cohesive feeling. Okay. So when you've got a cohesive feeling to a brand, it builds an easier, more authentic connection with somebody. It's like if you meet someone in person, they might talk with an accent, they might talk with a dialect, they might use certain words. Where I'm based in the UK, I'm based up north near Manchester. I'm a northern girl, I've got a certain way that I talk, and people gel with that. The right people that I work well with gel with my personality. So microcopy is an opportunity to really tighten up your personality. And whilst people, your ideal clients, are probably not thinking consciously, oh, I like that button, or I like that, that cookie banner, or, even I've done it for clients before where like things like the signature in their email is important. All these little micro moments of copy bring it back to this is a real person. I think it shows a real care and attention to your brand and what you do. It's kind of like you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's that you in your copy that shows that you care and that you're actually a real person. And let's face it, a lot of photography businesses are, there's a one main founder, there's one main person. You might have other people on your team, but usually there is a specific person that's known for being that particular photographer. You might be a studio, you might be slightly larger, but I've worked with for example, I've worked with a portrait photographer in Texas last year, and they were a studio, they were really established, but there was still the founder was a married couple, and they were who they were. And I think that is the opportunity across microcopy, is to just make that feel really real.
Yeah, I love your example at the beginning of your answer, the comparison to someone speaking out loud. And I can think of it the same way. And this might be a good segue to my next question, actually, about trust. If someone speaks to you in real life and they have a certain way, friendly way of chatting or a certain accent, but then when they leave, or when they greet you, they have a change in tone, or they talk formally all of a sudden, you're kind of, you're confused about that. And the same with the copy on a website being a certain style, and then the call to action buttons or some captions or some micro copy details being completely different or off brand. It looks unnatural, it reads unnatural, and you lose trust. And I guess that's the whole goal of good copywriting, to gain the trust of your website traffic.
Yeah, exactly. And I always say, it's not because you didn't put effort into your microcopy that you lost that person. They didn't convert into a lead, for example. Obviously, they're not going to say I didn't contact you because your button copy was rubbish. But it's a general feeling, it's a vibe that people get, and the vibe is very positive when they get that feeling across the whole website. And also, actually, as a business owner, as a photographer, it's exhausting to try and be something that you're not. But if you can be really natural and authentic throughout your whole copy, and then just be you on the sales call, or you in your, email or your communications with them, it's actually pretty good on the nervous system. You just feel real, you feel relaxed, you can just be you. And that is a lovely way to do business.
Well, let's just unpack that for a while. Why isn't everyone more authentic? Why they're scared to not be attractive enough, not physically, but as a business, and just try to please everyone? Are they're scared about being polarizing or being off-putting to the masses? But I know there's a danger of not connecting to your ideal client through that way. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? There's a lot to unpack here. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we live in a time of social media. We've got comparison traps all the time. So, if you've got somebody in your industry that you really admire and they have a particular brand voice, their messaging is skewed around a certain angle, then it's quite tempting to go, well, they're doing well, so I should sound like that. I'll be honest, I felt like that myself in the past. I think a lot of creative business owners have felt the pressure to almost live up to this set of rules that somebody else is living by. But the reality is that is exhausting, and that is not a healthy way to do business. So I think social media is a huge part of it, comparing ourselves constantly to our peers. And then I suppose the lack of confidence also comes from, and I'm a 90s baby. I was born in 91. I grew up in a time where, business speak, and, here in the UK, our curriculum was very, this is how you write a sentence, this is proper grammar, you're either good at English or you're not so academic. There was a lot of like academic writing. I went to university here in the UK, very much the same kind of academic writing was seen as like prestige. And I got out and went into the corporate world, and there was like almost like a certain way of talking that was seen as professional. What we've seen that's really interesting is like a break away from this now, but I think it's like a comfort zone to kind of put your professional business voice forward. But more people and more businesses are going, actually, we're just doing business with other people. So how we speak in our copy, in our messaging, can't that just be on like a human level? So I think it's improving. I think it's breaking down, but it's certainly still there, like in our history, and still affecting how we write in business communications, which your copy is part of that.
Especially with most photographers who are basically running a B2C business. Basically, their clients are individual consumers buying a service, buying a print, or something like that. So if they're more natural, they're more authentic, they're more trustworthy, they're not salesy. Um, in this sense, have you noticed any differences with working with photographers versus other industries?
Um, I mean, yes, I suppose, what writing for B2B, so is always going to be different for B2C. And I think photographers as a whole are getting more confident in just being who they are. And I think, like I talked about on social media before, you can see that people who are, I mean, social media is a little bit of a, you don't really know who's successful, but, people who seem to get the engagement and the traction on that side of things are the people that are leaning more into that personalized voice. Having said that, though, in the B2B world, say if you are a brand photographer, for example, so that is, it's B2B. I know locally here in Cheshire in the UK, there's a brand photographer that goes in and, photographs solicitors and accountants and, their team. That is B2B, but they're still, very happy to lean into who they are as a person, um, because they're still they're still an individual, and they're still valued just because they speak as they speak, which is a woman in Manchester, with their own personalities and their own quirks. They're not going to be like you know not taken as like not taken seriously. So I think there is a real shift overall into being more personal and being more confident in your own uniqueness, your boldness even.
Yeah, I love that we're, dancing at the edge of psychology here. It's
I know, yeah.
quickly turning into a small therapy session.
Yeah.
But it just, same with me when working with photographers. Oftentimes it's not for lack of information or technical stuff or platforms or whatever. It's courage. It's, putting yourself out there, managing all the fear and all of that. It's, we have to work through that as well when we're working with photographers and other industries. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, what you said about photographers versus other specialties, I guess would apply between photography specialties. I can imagine the copy being different from a maternity photographer versus a commercial or an architecture photographer. It just makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are trends. There are always going to be trends in industries. So you mentioned a motherhood photographer. Motherhood, usually maternity, newborn photography. There is usually more of a softer vibe. You're relating to the unique journey that is motherhood. it's very interesting because I was actually just talking about this the other day with somebody, with one of my clients. Is, whatever industry you're in, whether you're a motherhood photographer or you're a brand photographer, your copy's job is to be really specific and for them to feel like you get them. Okay, but you also don't want to generalize. Like, you don't want to get so specific that you offend because you've made a generalization. It's like a sliding scale. So whether you are a motherhood photographer or a brand photographer, that, like I said, there are certain trends that influence the voice and the message. Wedding photographers, you get a lot of like romantic, kind of whimsical copy. Brand photography, you can get quite like empowering, boost your business forward kind of messaging. Don't like the word boost, by the way, but that is kind of the general vibe. But what is really interesting, whilst I have definitely seen clear directions, there are also those that are not afraid to kind of go across and take a different angle, because they have, going back to what we said before, defined who they work really well with. So, as part of the research stage, when I was working on John's copy, and we looked at, I think there was a wedding photographer here in the UK who had a really kind of bold, fun, colourful approach to wedding photography. I think it used swear words. It was like, not in a crass way, but in a way that was fun and entertaining.
And the website design matched that as well.
It did, yes, exactly that. And that is what was part of the inspiration for John's photography. Despite him being, a different, he's not a wedding photographer at all. That's what he did in his previous years. Um, and being in a completely different location, it was really interesting to see how you can kind of go across these industry trends. And I could, obviously I'm in the UK. I'm actually getting married next year. So I've been, looking at wedding photographers myself and looking into that thing. It's like, oh yeah, that's really cool. She really stands out. I bet she's fun to work with. I'd rather have her at my wedding, because maybe she's more my vibe than, the one that's whimsical. And equally, the one that's more whimsical and romantic may suit another personality type. So I think that's like the really fascinating thing. Whilst there's always going to be different approaches, there's always going to be different trends. You being bold and going across that is actually something I think that's really going to make you stand out.
Speaking of standing out, there was some wording on your website. You spoke about trying to find the high level brand messaging for a business when you're preparing to write the copy for them. Uh, I didn't know what that meant at first. I connected it in my mind to, understanding what your business positioning is about, and from that, what your audience is. So before you can then write the copy for that audience, uh, why why is that important to you? Why do you start from that kind of brand messaging?
Yeah, so I always think messaging sounds like something that's almost like you can't grasp it, like it's almost more complicated than what it is. But essentially, what messaging is almost like um, one statement or like a theme that guides your overall web copy. And there are sub messages, so you would have like one key message, and what you would tend to do, and what is part of my process is to create a web copy concept first, and your concept will always be your homepage, because obviously that's where you're going to start. Once you define that messaging, and if you work with a copywriter like myself, the process will be easy because I do the research. We have a conversation, quite an extensive conversation, and I unearth what that message should be. I suggest, I advise. It's literally what I do. If you're DIYing it and you're doing it yourself, my biggest advice would be to be prepared to rip up 1,000 drafts and change things a million times. You're experimenting with some kind of statement that says exactly your value to your dream client. Okay. And it's getting it over in like one sentence, maybe a bit of copy underneath. And usually that makes up your hero copy on your homepage. So, hero copy being, your top banner, your top message. Usually that's
Which is something that not many photographers do have. Someone lands on their website for the first time and in 5 seconds they should get what the website is all about. But if there's no statement there, no hero message, they're left being a detective trying to infer what the website is about from the navigation menus or scrolling down, instead of it being in their face.
Exactly. And you know what? The wonderful thing is once you get that concept nailed down and you're really happy with it, and I can't remember the exact words with John's. I wrote it back in, gosh, I think it was like June, July now, maybe even earlier. But it's about awesome photography, being a cool guy, a fun guy who takes awesome photography in Rochester, New York. And once we nailed down that statement and all the things that underpin that statement on the homepage, pulling that across the rest of the web copy is easy. All right, yeah, I'm a copywriter. I can say easy, but it makes things feel a lot simpler. You're not having to come up with a million different ideas every time you write a new page of copy. Essentially, you want one really good idea and to pull it across the rest of the website.
Okay, so from the homepage, hero message, for example, from the higher level brand messaging, everything else flows naturally throughout the website when you want to fill in other pages, other sections on the homepage. Should photographers use personal stories throughout those sections, talk about themselves somehow, or are there places that should be kept more dry, let's say?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And storytelling is something that comes up with my clients all the time. A lot of my clients say, I've heard storytelling is really important in copy, but I don't want to tell my story. This is my business. I have my personal life, my private life. And I think they think of storytelling as almost, like the traditional opening a book, reading a novel, or, reading someone's autobiography, something like that. Now, with website copy, that is not the case. Storytelling is more about reflecting your ideal client's story and then maybe injecting a part of your own experience. So, a really good example would be like a newborn photographer. Okay, so someone's just had a baby, they've gone through this amazing, incredible, quite difficult, or often very difficult experience of bringing a baby into the world, and they want to celebrate this amazing milestones. Like, it's almost, any parents that are listening to this, it's like a miracle. You're like, blooming hell, I created this baby. Wow, this is amazing. And a lot of what you want to do is then tap into the emotions, their story. What was their story in terms of why do they want to celebrate their newborn? Getting into that story is how you make more of a personalized experience. You can reflect your own experience. So perhaps you're a mother or a father yourself. Maybe you understand what it looks like to marvel at those tiny little toes and think, my gosh, we made this. It's about injecting elements. It's not about writing, I was born in 1984 and I did X, Y, and Z and I did that. You don't, or, once upon a time there was a photographer.
If you were born in 18 something, you should write about it.
You should definitely. I mean, that is like a photographer that is just wow. um, so yeah, it's about injecting elements of storytelling, not the
Okay.
whole thing. In terms of when it should be more dry and factual, I think there are parts of it, usually FAQs, they just need to get to the point, they need to answer the question. Sure, you can inject your personality, you should still write them in your brand voice, but they don't need to be, like more, they don't need to be emotive. Again, when you're very commonly on a sales page or a service page, you will have what the actual deliverables are. So, it might be something like, 50 gallery shots, 1 round of edits, a consultation, yeah, that can be dry because that's just kind of getting to the point of exactly what someone's got. So there's areas where, a lot of it needs to kind of focus on that story, the story of the ideal client, injecting your own story, your own experience, and then keeping those dry bits for when they need the information quick.
Okay. And thanks for explaining the nuance between the two types of storytelling. One would be stories about your ideal client, that they should resonate with, the emotional aspects, but also stories about you as the photographer, which I guess is related to what we spoke about, authenticity and being yourself on the website. So that's basically a way for photographers to add personality to their website. They shouldn't shy away from that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need to say like I did X, Y, and Z. You can inject little parts of your story by mentioning that, you are a dad of two teenagers and that you get offended by them and you have to watch stupid TV shows because your 5-year-old puts them on, and little things like that can build the rapport.
Yeah, and I've seen this applied to about pages, the bio pages. Instead of being the boring, background university stuff, they actually had listed passions, hobbies, favorite Netflix shows, stuff like that. Maybe a certain client out there might be off put by something and they leave, but the clients they do attract are a better fit anyway.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about SEO, which is
Okay.
so important in photographers' minds all the time. They're often obsessed with SEO and it's closely related to copywriting. How do you, I think you touched a bit on it in the beginning, how do you balance writing for SEO, but also maintaining kind of a natural voice in your copy?
Yeah, I mean, there is a really strategic way to go about this, and without giving away my secrets, um, what I would always advise, and I'm happy to share this, is do your keyword research first. Have a really clear picture on, what keywords and key phrases are important for your ideal client. Do it and then don't look at it. If you're going to write your own copy, look at the keywords and then put it to the side and then write naturally. Write naturally for your audience. Think about what they really want to hear from you. And then that lovely list of keywords and key phrases, bring it back. Okay, you had it in your mind when you were writing. Okay, so it was there in your subconscious, and now you bring it back and you edit for SEO. But what you want to do, and I suppose this is where, it's easy enough for me to say because I do it all the time, week in, week out, but it's about sprinkling it through, but keeping the authenticity and the flow of the copy. Usually what happens is that certain keywords added into your copy actually elevate the copy. They make it tighter, they make it clearer, and yeah, it's actually a better experience for the reader. But if you put too many keywords in, so you keyword stuff, that's when you not only, be in danger of Google thinking this is keyword stuffing, which it does. It doesn't like keyword stuffing, and you get penalized for that. You also run the danger of an ideal client going, "What the hell does this mean? This does not make sense to me."
This sounds fake. It doesn't sound natural. It's clear that instead of saying photographer here, use the whole phrase, the SEO rich phrase everywhere, multiple times on the page.
Yeah, and you
It
can
doesn't
usually
read out loud well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of a really, great tip is, read your copy aloud. Does it feel natural? Yes, absolutely. You need keywords and you need a keyword strategy, and where to put those keywords is really important. In headings, in the first 150 words of your copy, you want to get a primary keyword in there, knowing where to place them, but above all, keeping it a really good user experience.
Okay. And how should copywriting then be integrated with web design and with user experience? I think we spoke about a bit in the beginning with the detailed wireframes that you provide with the strategy behind, but if you have any other thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on that, if you are whether if you're going to DIY your copy, then absolutely, I just say draw it out. Map it out your copy. Um, Essentially, what you want to do is approach your copy as an experience. So you want to be looking at scannability. You want to make sure that your headings are really clear. You want to make sure that it flows well. So if someone is scanning over, that they can zone in on certain sections, and it still makes sense. Um, and you also then, whilst that is more the visual side and the wireframe and how it's going to work with the design, it is also important to look at it from a boring Google Doc perspective, I would say, to make sure that you are clear on what heading structure you're having. So, again, if you're DIYing your copy, you're probably not going to really think about this. But from a professional copywriter point of view, you've got to have really clear keyword. I don't want to say keyword rich, because the keyword shouldn't be in all the headings, but it should be strategic enough that you are thinking of your copy as in terms of opportunities for SEO. So yeah, there's when I'm working with a website designer like yourself, Alex, is that I want to give you the visual strategic flow of how the copy works within the design. So like like the wireframe, but I also want you to understand what the SEO stuff that we don't actually see on the front end. So, what tags are being applied, and also, don't forget those title tags and meta descriptions. If you want to show off on Google, those kind of things really matter.
And I enjoyed this project because the wireframe was so well thought out. I didn't have to um, get back to the copywriter and say, "Hey, this section needs more," or "This is too much. It doesn't pair well with the design we had in mind," or stuff like that. It was less back and forth because it just fit well. Um, we cannot end this interview without talking about AI.
I knew you were going to say that.
um, I can imagine photographer. Everyone knows, ChatGPT, Claude, all the other ones. Uh, how can they use AI to help them write copy themselves, or if they do hire a professional copywriter like yourself, can AI complement that in some way, or where do you see that intersection?
So, over the past year, I've had to really kind of accept that AI isn't going anywhere, and it's going to get better. And obviously, as a copywriter, at first I was like, oh no, this is terrible. But actually, you know, where I think AI, things like ChatGPT, come into fruition is, like we talked about at the start, a distinction of the people starting out. So if you're starting out and you just want to get something off the ground, yes, AI could probably help you get some basic copy out there. I think AI is really good for ideation. It's good for getting you started. It's good for getting rid of that blank page. Okay, so if you don't have the budget and you don't want to invest in a copywriter, then go ahead and use it, get it off the ground. But what I would say is, please, 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 whatever you get, please sprinkle your own personality into it and trust yourself that actually you might know better than the robot on the internet that doesn't actually feel anything. It doesn't feel emotions. It doesn't feel what you felt when you've sat with your ideal client. It's not felt what you've said when that dreamy business reaches out for you for brand photography and they need like a huge shoot, and you're thinking, oh, this is an amazing project, and feeling what they're feeling, frustration with their brand, with their brand image at the moment. It can't feel all those things. So if you're going to use it to help you with the framework, and also, you know feed into it as much information as you can. If you say to AI, please write my web copy for my wedding photography business, you are going to get the most generic nonsense that is not going to help you stand out. And also,
That's not even a complete example. Even if you're a prompt expert and I say to it, "Hey, give me the copy for this homepage," and I have this history as a photographer, and here are references, here are other pages I've written in the past, and make it sound like this. My ideal client is this. The output still doesn't match what a professional copywriter does.
exactly. And I've looked into a lot about how AI actually is developed, and it's essentially a load of people being paid per hour on platforms like work from home jobs, feeding into AI, editing it, writing for it. Da, 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 da. So I guess it's like a giant mishmash of all that, which, okay, sometimes it could get close, but it's not the same as having one human brain focused as a professional on what you've got. But I understand if it's not in your budget, you've got to use the tools and the resources that you have. So I guess it's, yeah, ideation, put your own stamp on it, and then, yeah, okay, I think it's quite good for tightening things up, asking to rephrase, edit, make things neater, tidier. Use it for that. I think treat it as a tool, treat it as something that helps you, don't rely on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay. Um, let's then make it more practical and just ask you, if someone were to want to hire you for a copywriting project, what's the process look like for you? I don't know, what should they prepare, thoughts on timeline, whatever you can give out.
Yeah, so the average website, like a service-based website, can take anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks, which does sound like quite a long time, but I'm literally talking from the initial kickoff call right to the final editing stage where it goes, or wrap up stage where it goes to the website designer. It can take a little bit shorter depending on what's involved, but yeah, that's the average time scale, and that's what I say you allow for. So, for example, if you want to get a new website in the new year, you need to start looking now and get booked in, okay? Because it's not something that can be done in 2 weeks like that, or certainly isn't with my process. Um, in terms of the actual process, if you were to work with me, it all starts with homework. No one likes that word. It's not that bad. It's essentially, I give you a couple of tasks, and it is literally a couple of tasks. It's to fill in a questionnaire, and also to send a questionnaire to any dream clients that you already have, or really good clients, so I can get their input on who you are. Okay, so that's a bit of a research stage, and then I go away and do my research, and then we have a kickoff call about a week later, where we sit down for 60 to 90 minutes and we go through a workshop. So I have like a little workshop that I run, and we go through the key things that I need to get out your brain in order to clarify what your messaging is, who your brand voice, what your brand voice is going to be like, and everything that you need technically in your web copy. So from SEO to how your services work. So that is like it's really fun. Actually, it's quite interactive. You can feel quite tired afterwards, but we do stop and have a coffee break. And then the next stage is your initial concept. So this is what I've been talking about all throughout this, is your messaging. So this is where we define how your copy is going to work, what is your high level messaging, and we make sure that we're happy with that initial concept. Once we're happy with that initial concept, there might be like one round of edits, 2 rounds of edits. We then write all the other pages, which is usually done in phases. I think John had something like 8 pages of copy, then plus the contact page and stuff. So that was a multi-phase project. So he got chunks of like 2 pages at each time, but smaller projects could all be done in one phase. Once we're happy with the copy, we then do final SEO checks, proofreading, make sure that everything is just ready to go over to your website designer. We wrap it all up. We send a Loom video to the website designer explaining how the copy documents work, and just kind of talking you through the process of using the resources, the copy that I'm sending you. After that point, after the website designer's gone away and done their amazing thing, I do a final check over the website just to make sure that everything flows just as it should, and that the SEO tags are in the right place, and that everything is just as I intended. And then we sign the project off, and you are ready to go with your beautifully designed and amazingly focused and strategic copy. And that's it.
Okay, perfect. This was very detailed, and if it sounds to anyone like there are a lot of stages involved, they all serve a purpose, and I can vouch for that from when we work together. No other copywriter has recorded a Loom video for me with instructions and detail, so that's one detail to mention. Um, Okay, perfect. This was awesome, Zoe. If I hope photographers watching this found it valuable,
Yeah.
at least understood the importance of copywriting in general. If you have any other parting words and just to let photographers know where they can find you online, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, that's great. And just to touch on what you said, Alex, about the process, whilst the process feels like it has quite a lot of steps, from you as a client, my job is to actually make you feel as relaxed as possible and to make it easy for you. So everything in terms of how you feed back to me, how you receive the amends, and even sending it over to your website designer, it's all handled for you. Because I know that you have a lot on. You do have a lot on. So, you know, you're busy running your business. So it's meant to be a really easy, enjoyable, and exciting process. And you know, fortunately, clients usually report that at the end of the process. So that is yeah, that's what I intend. In terms of where you can find me, so my name is Zoe Barnett. I am a website and SEO copywriter. My business is called Zoe Connected, and my website is zoeconnected.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Zoe_connected. And I'm also on LinkedIn under Zoe Barnett. And I would love, you know, if you're even just in that initial thinking stage, please do reach out and follow me along. I share lots of content on my social channels, on my blog, on my email. You can subscribe, that will really help you get started with your copywriting journey, your website, even if you're not ready to invest yet.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Zoe. Bye, everyone.
Bye.